Welcome to the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel, and on today's episode, I'm speaking with Sabrina Fandell, a vice president at the International Dyslexia Association. Sabrina combines strategic vision with authentic advocacy to drive growth and awareness. She's passionate about fostering inclusive environments, inspired by her personal experiences as a neurodivergent leader with dyslexia and as a parent of a child with dyslexia. She's dedicated to empowering diverse thinkers, promoting neurodiversity awareness, and championing innovative solutions that help individuals and organizations thrive. Sabrina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, Caroline.
I'm really excited to learn more about your story. You yourself have dyslexia and you have a child with dyslexia as well. So I'd love to hear more about your own story growing up. Like, what was it like for you growing up with dyslexia that was undiagnosed at the time?
I think I compared myself to my son's kind of course a couple times now. And interestingly enough, my younger son also just recently got diagnosed with dyslexia. So we're all a couple of, we always joke in our house, like left and right. It's kind of a little bit hard for us. We're other left, we're right. But I always say, like, my son's so lucky. He gets these like pullouts. He gets to go see a dyslexia specialist. There's all these like accommodations and things that make his learning a little bit smoother for us. As a 80s child, we got pulled out. There's 3 of us. We got pulled out and kind of put it in the book closet.
Oh.
So it was like this closet in between 2 of the classrooms where all the books were stored. It was like their storage closet, really. And that's where we would do our reading. And I just remember being embarrassed, like to go. And then we were reading, easier books than the other students. We had to read like chapter books and like cool plots. And, they were very interesting. And we were like, the dog and the cat like to play fetch, so a little bit of a different story for us. And, I remember going to the library and picking out the biggest book I could possibly pick out. Just to be like, one day I'll read this, one day I will go through this book. And I would just kind of like flip through the pages and read, the words that I could read without really understanding the whole book. But just thinking to myself, like, one day I'll be able to understand the story. And I've had a couple of impactful teachers in my life. One was in 6th grade, Mr. Bone, and he kind of allowed for more of a reading kind of system where it's like you could get under your desk and read your book. You could, because I was always like, we're reading the same book, and you notice kids in the class like flipping to the next page, flipping to the next page, flipping to the next page, and you're sitting there like still trying to read, the first or second page. And that's always, just a little bit of a heartbreak. And you're always kind of comparing yourself as a dyslexic student to other students, unfortunately. And he just allowed for us to kind of like get where we felt most comfortable, read what we could read. He would stay behind and answer any questions about the books that I had. And then I had a teacher in high school. He was blind. And he realized, hey, when I do the study guide questions and you guys all put your notes and stuff away, and I have my student aide, so she knows that you don't have anything out on your desk, you do very, very well. But then when I give you the test the next day, you're like failing the test. What's going on? Mm-hmm. So it's been like a couple teachers that really, saw me for the student I was and made changes to their classroom, to the way that they taught, or the changes were already in place that just made it more inclusive and made it easier to be a part of that like classroom and that learning environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that experience that you had with your teacher in high school who was blind, it's an interesting key that he was having students do parts of the tests orally, so not written, so that he could judge them. And it's interesting that was one of the ways that he kind of helped uncover, like, wait, there's this discrepancy between you doing really, really well when I ask you about it and you can tell me, like, you understand the material, but there's something about the written test that is not really showing what you know.
Yeah. Well, I think you see that too, in math classes with some of the dyslexic students, including my son, is like, he's doing so well in math, so well. And then all of a sudden, math goes from just numbers to word problems.
Right.
And students will drop off. They'll have a great understanding and comprehension of math. And then all of a sudden, once you add those word problems in, it just falls off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the invention of speech to text, text to speech has been so great. And I'm envious. I wish, that we had those options when I was a kid. I think even now with like audiobooks, it's just kind of like opening things up and being able to kind of follow along as you read the audiobook or as the audiobook is read to you can really help, especially on those words where you're like, I just give up,
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was a kid, I would hit a couple of those in a row and I'd be like, I'm done trying. It was too hard.
Yeah. Wow. So how did you actually find out that you have dyslexia?
We got the diagnosis in middle school with Mr. Bone. And then I got a 504 plan, which is different than today's like IEPs, and they're 504 plans, but still exist. But the accommodations are much broader and we're much more aware than we were back then. I think my 504 plan included like some more time on tests, and that was about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was about it. And my dad was very against me utilizing anything, any kind of accommodations.
Wow.
He was like, you're not going to get these accommodations in the real world. Do you think your boss is going to give you more time to finish your assignments? I think having like a strong-headed father, which is interesting because I married a strong-headed man. And so I see him kind of having these same revelations that my dad had with my son. So we're sitting down just like this last month. And my son started a new grade. He started a new school. And they're doing spelling quizzes, which they never did at the old school. And the teacher wrote us a nice email and was like, hey, we have 10 spelling words, but since Nash has his accommodations, he really only has to do 5. He can do as many as he is able to, but we really want to focus on these 5 because they're really important. And I'm like, this is great, but this is wonderful. And my husband took it another way where he was like, well, he's got to learn all those words. He can't just learn half the words. And so just like seeing what my parents went through with me, and my brother is also dyslexic and ADHD, seeing kind of like those same triggering arguments happening between the two of us is interesting. And, kind of explaining to him, it's not less effort that he's putting in. He's putting in more or similar effort to the other kids to learn the 10 words. It's overwhelming to sit in front of a list like that and know that it doesn't make sense. And, some of the things that I've seen is he kind of processes through the words. He'll write it one way one day. He'll write it right the next day. Then he'll be like, I don't know if that was right. And so he'll write it a different way the next day. He's just kind of like going through the possibilities. Like, this is the possible ways it can be spelled. Or like every day it's a different possibility. And with dyslexia and ADHD comes like memory, cognition issues, right? And so he doesn't remember that he spelled it right the day before. He knows one of the versions he tried was right, but he can't remember which one, right? And so it really is sometimes like a guessing game and all the possible outcomes, right? Which is what's really, really interesting about dyslexic people and ADHD people, because I think that's what makes us so skillful in our careers, is that we look at all the possible outcomes. We look at a problem and kind of decipher all the ways we can attack that problem. And it's just a different way of thinking than a neurotypical person thinks. They're like, this is the right way and this is the only way. I've worked with people like that where they like cannot be budged. But I'm like, there are a couple ways to solve this problem. We don't have to do it the same way every time.
Yeah. That's a really important point, is that there are multiple ways to solve problems or approach different tasks or activities. For example, sure, he probably should learn all 10 words, but he doesn't have to learn them all like today or in this lesson.
Yeah.
Like there's, just because that's the assignment doesn't mean that everybody has the equal ability to do that assignment with the same levels of effort. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. That's when I was in school. And I think that was the overwhelming attitude, at least what I hear from a lot of my guests who grew up at that time too, was that even if you get accommodations, you still need to, it's like you still need to do the same level of work, and that's expected. And I understand part of the drive and wanting to keep people, motivated and moving forward. But at the same time, as you said, it's not the same as someone who's not dyslexic learning how to spell. Like it's a different level of effort. And yeah, it just has to be sometimes different methodology and a different path to be able to do things like that.
Yeah. When we were going through sight words with him, his therapist had told us a dyslexic child will have to see a word 500 times before they start to recognize it. So it's just a repetition.
Yeah.
And when we were doing the spelling, I had a flashback to my dad trying to go through my spelling words with me, and I would have to write those words 100 times. And I just remember, they call it educational trauma, where you're just like so affected by the way you learned. There's a couple things like being put in that book closet. And I think we've all done this as children. I hope, it's not just dyslexic kids, but you count the kids in your classroom so you know which paragraph you'll be reading. You practice that paragraph, but you counted wrong, or someone went to the bathroom and now you're on a whole new paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when we're in our board meetings, most of us are dyslexic or have someone in our lives who are dyslexic, but sometimes we're supposed to read something in our board meetings. We're like, oh my God, bear with me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'll never find a more understanding and loving group than that board of directors on the International Dyslexia Association. They are truly just amazing.
That's great. That's really wonderful. And, working with your son, he obviously has a lot more options for accommodations than were around when you were in school. And does he have a tutor as well? Because I'm curious about his tutor's techniques. And do you find the tutor's techniques also helpful for you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I roped in one of the board members who's a therapist to tutor my boys. Mm-hmm. And so he comes by twice a week and sits with them 30, 40 minutes. That's like all you can get out of them, really, attention-wise. Some days it's less, some days they can't focus, and that's fine. But I'll be in the kitchen because our kitchen is, we have one of those open floor plans, kitchen, dining room, living room. And so they'll be in the dining room doing their studying, and I'll be like, oh, those two letters make that sound always? Like just weird things that, we were told over and over again, sound it out. And back in the 80s and 90s, we were using phonics, right? And now they have, the science of reading, they have take flight, they have all these different methodologies to teach you how to read, besides sound it out. Mm-hmm. And when you don't know these two letters make this sound, it's hard to sound it out, The English language is complex.
Yes. It's like when they always used to tell us, like, if you don't know how to spell a word, look it up in the dictionary. It's like, but I don't know how to spell it. Like, how am I going to look it up in the dictionary?
I know. My dad was a real proponent for the encyclopedia and the dictionary and look it up. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, I think we were playing like Cards Against Humanity, and he got a word that was like a newer word to the English language. And he didn't know it, so he pulled out the dictionary and starts to look it up. My kids are like, what's Grandpa doing? What is that book? And I'm like, you don't even know, because you just go, okay, I'm not going to say it. We're going to Google, but it'll be, okay, Alexa, like whatever.
Yeah.
And it just answers your question. My kids are always like, search it out. Search it up, Mom. Just search it up. We don't believe your answer. Search it up.
Oh, we have like autocorrect when we're typing and Grammarly and like all these tools now that just weren't around.
What I wouldn't have given for Grammarly when I was going for college and high school. Oh my God. I had my parents with like a red pencil. And of course, I was always like finishing homework late at night. So you'd like deliver it to their bedroom. They'd read it in bed and underline and cross out words with their red pencil and give it back to you. And you have to go back. And I saw something the other day. People were like, why do people have printers back in the day? Like, do people even use printers anymore besides for like printing or packaging labels? And most of the time, it's like a QR code. They just scan or print it.
Yeah.
And I was like, we printed all of our papers. We had to print them out and then edit them and then go in and fix everything and then print it out again and again. And directions, right? Like even directions.
Oh, yeah.
MapQuest, you can just pull that up in the phone. So.
Yeah. I know it's amazing how things have changed over the past several decades. The tools are just so much more interactive and flexible.
Well, that's one of the interesting things, like attending these dyslexia conferences, is like the impact AI could potentially have on teaching a dyslexic student, right? Not all dyslexic students learn the same way. Not all dyslexia is the same, right? There's variations, there's levels, so even in ADHD, I have one son who's hyperactive and the other son who's like, well, daydream, hard to get him to pay attention, but they both can hyper focus. They can't sit through a meal. No way, no how. But it's interesting that AI could be a tool to help us teach these children and say, Nash is having a problem reading these vowels or ending his sentence like this consistently. And so if these students are reading out loud to the AI can track their eye movement. They can track where they're having problems. It is going to change the way that we teach reading 110%.
Wow. That's really fascinating to think about the possibilities and how customizable an AI solution like that would be for students.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You are also involved with the International Dyslexia Association. How did you first get involved with that group?
I will tell you, I have women in my life that I admire and look up to. And I was reading a book. I can't remember which one it is. It's a Dream Years, something like that, where you're trying to like have your best year. And it was talking about, find someone you admire and see if you can pinpoint what you admire about them. So one of the women that I admire, she was on boards. She was, volunteering with her son's older than mine. She was volunteering and spending a lot of time doing work with her son together. And I thought, God, that's really cool. I would love to volunteer and give my time to something that I'm passionate about that really affects me, affects my kids. When I was looking at different boards, I also looked in, my dad has Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And so that's one that I was like looking at. And when I met with this board and did my interview, they were just so welcoming. And I was like, this is a home. This is a place that I could stay. And I looked forward to not just giving what I could to the board, which at the time was, I was a resource manager, strategic planner, and a project manager. I had experience, raising money. I wouldn't just be able to give that to the board, but the board would actually give back to me, which is learning more about dyslexia and how it affects my son, how it affects other children, and then making sure that, the struggles we've had to face with my son are being faced amongst, hundreds of thousands of other students in Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. One thing that just recently came up when my son was first diagnosed, his first grade teacher said, hey, I know you've mentioned this because you are dyslexic, but I think your son might be as well. Well, we went and sat in on the ARD meeting. They said, hey, thanks for calling this meeting, but your son's testing too high and it's first grade. And we really don't think, kids don't really learn how to read until second grade. So we can't really diagnose it right now.
Wow.
What I've learned since being on the board is, early diagnosis can happen as soon as kindergarten. And that early intervention is massively impactful. You don't want to be in the position where your son or daughter is struggling for middle school and then you finally realize what you could have done to help them. Even, with Nash and his ADHD, it's like, man, the things we could have put in place to help him a little bit sooner, focus, and to help him, set him up for the day a little bit better, like less sugar in the morning, healthier breakfast, things like that. Maybe taking a walk to school instead of driving to school, all set him up for success, right? And so just being aware is just part of the battle. So they said, sorry, he's testing too high. It's too early to diagnose. We're not going to do it. Wow. And the teacher recommended we go get an outside evaluation. And we did one of those dual evaluations that was for ADHD and dyslexia. The examination process, I think, took 3 or 4 hours, which is a long time for a kid.
Yeah.
Especially with ADHD. Mm-hmm. But they tracked, they tracked his movement. They tracked his, brain waves, everything. I mean, it was really, really interesting. And they came back and said, we're noticing he's having this problem where he sees it. He can tell it to you, but when he has to write it down, he's having issues. Just copying a sentence. He'll skip letters and things will go up and off the page. And so they recommended a vision therapist, which was really interesting. I'd never been introduced to those. I didn't even know they existed.
Wow.
And then we were able to take that evaluation, take it back to the school, and the school was finally like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll do our 45-day assessment now. Oh. So again, it's like the process to get the wheels in motion is so long. And recently, our board just voted to start doing assessment as part of our scholarship program.
Wow.
So we'll be partnering with Scottish Rite to be funding assessments for students. We're really, really excited about it because almost half of the parents I talk to, that is like the first challenge they encounter is, I think my student's dyslexic and I can't seem to get the school to agree to assess them. And, everyone will say, by law, the school has to assess them, but the school is only given so much money for assessment, and they really have to prioritize what they're doing. And this is one of those ways that we can help those parents out.
Yeah. You mentioned that one of the reasons that you wanted to be on the board of the International Dyslexia Association is because you want to learn more about dyslexia and the impacts on your son and other ways to help other children as well. Having that experience on the board, has it kind of helped you heal a little bit from the experiences that you had in your childhood?
It brings clarity. It brings a better understanding of that's why I went through that. Or that's why that happened. Or that's why that was so hard to understand. And it's provided me the ability to grant myself some grace. And, I always, unfortunately, one of my personality traits is, measuring myself against a sibling or a peer or a friend. And just being like, why was it so hard for me? Why was it so easy for them? Mm-hmm. And I've been able to give myself a little more grace. There's a couple of speeches that I've listened to at, we have a DIG meeting that happens every month that is free. People can attend. It's virtual online. And that is where I first heard about the mental health and behavior aspect for children with dyslexia. And starting to realize just even simple things like instead of doing a reading challenge where you challenge your students to read 200 pages over the summer, you're actually challenging them to read 200 hours instead of 200 pages.
Okay.
And that's something they can measure and match up with their peers on. And so it has a healthier impact on their mental health. Looking at dyslexic students, we see higher rates of depression and anxiety. And I get that. It's there. I remember the anxiety of going to school and, not having the homework assignment perfectly done, or, the writing assignment wasn't where I wanted it to be, because it was like a little bit of perfectionism for me too. And so that was a great meeting that had a huge impact on me. We just recently had our national conference here in Dallas. So I was able to attend that. And they had a woman who spoke on ADHD with dyslexia. And I started to understand my son a little bit better. And we also had speakers that talked about IEP meetings. And that's when I realized, I really needed to kind of bring the hammer in some of these IEP meetings. It's so hard because you're sitting across the table from 5, 6, 7 educators. In my son's case, he had a reading teacher, he had the principal, he had his counselor, he had his 3 other teachers, and a special education staff member as well. It's a huge board to sit across from. And I've always wanted to believe that educators have a heart where it's like they want to get what's best for the child. And I still really believe that. But I think some educators have become like this illusion, or like maybe they're just been beaten down a little bit and are more like pessimistic, more negative, and have found it sometimes hard to see eye to eye with some of these people. Since my son has ADHD, instead of being like, okay, well, what accommodations does Nash have where we could kind of assess this problem? They always like come to the parent and they want the parent to come up with a solution. Like, you are the educator with 20 years under your belt. You tell me the solution. And I think being on this board has helped me understand the difference, and the different types of solutions, and the, different offerings. You can even get someone to come in and help you with those IEP meetings, so you're not alone. You don't have to know the laws.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a challenge where, as a parent, you feel like you really have to come in super prepared and educated. Yeah. Otherwise, it's really, really challenging.
You do come in educated and prepared and with that, advocate like I've done in the past. Then sometimes the principal's there. The principal was very defensive and very much like, I think our advocate had said, by law, he should be taught by the highest educated in reading and dyslexia. So they wanted to move him just to a special ed class in reading therapy. And he's like, that doesn't track,
Yeah.
And the reading therapist had said, hey, we did our program with him. He's done. He's graduated. Move him on.
Wow.
And we had to bring up the bylaw part, and she got very, very defensive and upset. And I think, gosh, it's like a fine line. You don't want to like encroach too much on their territory where they're defensive now. And now all of a sudden they're bringing, the district lawyer to your IEP meeting. But sometimes that's what happens.
Wow. You're right. That is a really fine line to walk, to advocate, but at the same time, work with the dynamic of the people that you're with. Yes, exactly. So the organization that you work with, the International Dyslexia Association, I know you mentioned that you're based in Texas, but I'm guessing by the name that it's international. Is this a resource that parents can use for situations like that, just to either get information or support if they need to work with schools?
So we have a hotline. You can call into the hotline anytime, and people, get you the answer you need. You can email us. You can Facebook. You can DM us on Instagram. We can help you. We just recently renovated our website, and we're adding what we're calling currently a parent pathway, where if you're a visual person, assume that it's like Candyland, and different people are on different parts of the map, right? Maybe you're son or daughter is in middle school and they want to know if there's a community of students that they can talk to online about what's going on in their classrooms and issues they're facing, right? These are all monitored by parents and things like that, these chats. Yeah. But, it'll give you a resource for them. If you're going into your first IEP or 504 meeting, we have checklists for that where it's like, here are all the accommodations you can ask for. We have videos, old Zig meetings, video speakers, short clips, long videos, anything. Like, we'll meet you where you're at in your dyslexia journey with yourself or your student and really try to help you. But we want it to be like something very easy to navigate for parents where it's like, hey, I'm going to an IEP meeting. I would like an advocate. I need to find one in my area. Here's a directory. Here's a directory of therapists in your area. You need a therapist that travels to you. You probably have to come to our hotline, but if you want a therapist that travels to you or if you want to go to them, we can find a solution for you. We are North Texas. So there's also an Austin and a Houston branch of the International Dyslexia Association. And we have moved into Oklahoma and Arkansas. So we also support those regions. We hold annual conferences that are for parents and teachers. Like I said, we have an online dig meeting, which happens every month. And then we just have a ton of resources. And so we want to, put the resources at your fingertips and make things easily accessible. And really, we're always around. Like I said, find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram, send us a message, and we will get you an answer. Might not be right away, but we'll get you an answer. We'll find someone.
Very cool. And did you mention earlier that you also have scholarships for testing?
So we have scholarships. This just opened up where we voted on it last month. Wow. So we're broadening our scholarships. In the past, our scholarships have just been for therapy and remediation and tutoring. And now we're broadening that because we've seen the need, right? We have parents coming to us all the time. I can't get my kid assessed. And so that's where this partnership will come into effect, where we'll be helping out with assessment as well.
Very cool.
And we've been raising more money than we ever have in the past. So we have more scholarship funding than we ever have in the past. Our branch, we just found out, is like #1 among all the International Dyslexia Association branches. We've been raising the most, doing the most, holding the most conferences. And so we're really, really proud of where we're at and where we're going.
Wow, that's excellent. Do you have a website that people should go to if they want to learn more?
Yes, it's DallasIDA.com. And in October is Dyslexia Awareness Month.
Right.
So you'll be seeing a lot of stuff on dyslexia this month from us. And we are doing our annual fundraiser to try to raise money and fund those scholarships and assessments. We also run our conferences for teachers. Those are for teachers, for parents. We're not really bringing in any income from that for our branch. We've just decided to just operate them at cost, and it's been really, really great. We kind of made them a little bit smaller so people can mix and mingle and, meet each other. And that's what our teachers are telling us they really love.
That's really awesome. And you mentioned that there was a hotline phone number. Is that on the website as well if people want to call
in? The hotline phone number is on the website, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And like I said, Instagram, Facebook, message us via any form that you'd like.
Okay, perfect. And again, you're in the Dallas area, but the International Dyslexia Association is really everywhere, multiple chapters. So if you're somewhere else in the country or maybe even in another country, you can find your local chapter. That's really cool. Awesome. Yeah. What general advice do you have for parents who may see their children struggling with reading or learning?
I would practice patience and grace. My dad used to be her phonics thing. He used to be so frustrated. And he's so frustrated that we've gone over this 6 times. How do you not get it yet? Every kid learns at their own pace, a dyslexic child or non-dyslexic child. But I think our words and what we say to our children have a huge impact. It builds their self-talk. It helps them build their personality and who they'll be in the future. Stay as positive as you can because they know they're struggling. They do. They know it. And, seek help. If you don't know, find someone who does. And that's something I would take into business. I would take anywhere. If you don't know, find someone else who does. That's why I work with mentors on my business side as well, because I'm not an expert at all things,
Mm-hmm.
And we just have to realize that about ourselves because we know how to read doesn't mean that we know how to teach a dyslexic child how to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so go seek help, find a tutor, find a therapist, find those resources. They're out there.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, Sabrina, for the work that you're doing to support the dyslexic community. And thank you for being a guest on my podcast.
All right. Thanks. Have a great one.